On today's episode, for just the third time in this show's history, we have a down and dirty bracket-style showdown. And this time, it's soft plastic craws. So we've taken 8 of the best-selling soft plastic craws on the planet, broke each of them down in terms of price, packaging, colors, durability, and action, and we eventually crown our winner for the best soft plastic craw on the market. All that and more on this episode of Tackle Talk.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bill Dance, and you're listening to Tackle Talk.
Welcome to the Tackle Talk podcast, brought to you by American Legacy Fishing and Outdoors. World-class fishing gear, unmatched personal service. Now, here's your host, Andrew Hayes.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Tackle Talk podcast. If you're listening to this on the day it comes out, I hope you had a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holiday Season. It should be the day after Christmas, I believe, that you're probably listening to this, which means American Legacy Fishing is in the dead middle of their 12 Days of Christmas sales. So right now, over at American Legacy Fishing, you can still take advantage of 35% off Costa sunglasses, 20% off Yamamoto, 10% off all gift cards, 20% off Z-Man, 30% off select used gear, 20% off all terminal tackle, 40% off all 13 fishing rods and reels, 40% off Power Pro, and they brought back their Black Friday sales that end December 31st. And so those sales, if you remember back to Black Friday, are back on right now. So they have a Die with Secret sale, 20% off all Dobbins rods, 25% off all Abu Garcia, 35% off the Shimano Corrado K, 10% off Garmin, 20% off Beast Coast, 25% off Berkeley, 20% off Spro, 25% off Arc rods, 20% off all 6 Sense, 30% off Sunline, 30% off Seagar, a 25% rebate on St. Croix, 25% off select Lose gear, 30% off Waterland sunglasses, 25% off all Plano Edge storage boxes, and a ton more. I can't even name them all. So go over and check them out over at www.americanlegacyfishing.com. They should be the first place you check for rods, reels, tackle, line. They have the best sales, the best service, the best shipping in the industry, all from a Midwestern tackle shop that actually cares about you. So www.americanlegacyfishing.com. And as always, if what you're looking for is not on sale, you can use code TACKLETALK10. Tackle Talk 10 at checkout saves you 10% off almost everything on the website. So again, www.americanlegacyfishing.com and code TACKLETALK10. All right, everybody. Today we are getting right into the good stuff. We're jumping right in, and we're going to bring back an episode that we've done 2 or 3 times in the past. I think the first time we did it was probably a little over 2 years ago, probably, and it was around March Madness, and I wanted to embrace that sort of bracket system that we all love watching for college basketball. So we took that and we did it for an episode, and back then it was types of soft plastics, I think, or maybe types of baits in general, but I think it might have been types of soft plastics. So it was like grubs, worms, craws, creature baits, and we just compared like those types of baits, not brands or anything like that. So it would be like grubs in the first round matchup going up against soft plastic worms, things like that. And then about a year later, we did another one comparing 8 of the top jerk baits on the market. And I believe in that one, the Lucky Craft Pointer came out the winner, and it knocked out the Vision 110 in the final round. So today, as we wrap up 2023 and you guys all recover on the couch from your Christmas activities, we're going to put together a bracket of the 8 top-selling soft plastic craws from each of the top brands in the market. So it's Yum, Strike King, NetBait, Berkeley, Zoom, X-Zone, Savage Gear, and Z-Man, I believe. So I know you're thinking, well, there's a bunch of brands right there that were left out. Yes, obviously there were. You can make an argument for 6 Sense, Guggen, Rapala. There's all kinds of people that you could put in that, Big Bite Baits, things like that. But when you have to narrow down the field to 8 to be in the bracket, you're obviously going to have to snub some people. So if we did a 16 or a 32 craw bracket, then everybody could be in it, but we'd be here till next Tuesday doing this episode because there would be so many matchups. So we're going to stick with 8 here. So what I've done is I've taken the 8 most popular craws on the planet and seeded them based on their sales rankings on Tackle Warehouse. You know how you can like filter best selling, things like that, and it'll tell you basically like what order they sell in. So I did that on Tackle Warehouse because they have every brand, and I wanted to make sure that the seeding was fair and and not in terms of like popularity or my own opinion on each, because the fun part is in the bracket, we're going to get to my opinion. So it wouldn't make any sense to seed them that way, because then it gives away who's going to win. So we did the seeding based on their sales numbers or the best info that we can get from the internet in terms of their sales numbers and their popularity. So without further ado, your bracket for soft plastic craws is as follows. In the first round, you have the number 1 seed, the Zoom Speed Craw, facing off against the number 8 seed, the Yum Christie Craw. Next matchup we have is the number 2 seed, the Strike King Rage Craw, versus the number 7 seed, the Z-Man TRD Craws. Next up, we're going to have the number 3 seed Berkeley Chigger Craw versus the number 6 seed Savage Gear 3D Craw. And then our final matchup of the episode is the number 4 seed Netbait Paca Craw versus the number 5 seed the X-Zone Lures Adrenaline Craw. So again, for the second time here, I know you're listening to that list and you're like, well, there's things that we should have put in there, right? Obviously, the Zoom Z Craw is one that probably should be in there. But what I wanted to do, I wanted to make sure that we had one from each brand. So I didn't want to have a brand in here with 2 or 3 different participants. I want all different brands going up against each other. That's the fun of the show, right? We don't have sponsors. We don't have certain brands that we do or don't have to talk about. So we get to talk about everything. And the more brands you can incorporate in this, I think the better. I don't want to have 3 Zooms, 2 Strike Kings, and 3 Yums, right? That's not a very fun bracket. I want as many different brands and companies in here as we can, and we can talk about them. The other side of this is like, say, let's take the Zoom Z Craw, for instance, one that did get left off this list. We have something very similar on this list in the X-Zone Lures Adrenaline Craw. They're both very similar kind of profiles and sort of action there a little bit too. When you look at them side by side, you could say, okay, I could see how we only really need one of those in this bracket. The other thing you could say is like, let's talk about the Rapala Cleanup Craw that just came out. I'm not putting it in here because I don't have enough time on the water with that bait to really talk about it intelligently. I guess I would basically just be going off of what I've seen on, tank videos, and I've went out and fished it once, but that's not enough for me to come out here and really say, oh, I think I know how to talk about it compared to some of these other craws that I've fished for hours and hours and hours. So the jury's still out on that one a little bit. I want to give that one some time to breathe before we really kind of jump to conclusions and compare it to other things. The other one, so let's say like the Rage Tail Scound Bug is not on this list, even though it is one of my favorite newer craws on the market in the past probably year or two. But again, we already have a Rage Tail plastic on here in the Rage Craw, so we didn't want to double them up either. Then you have things like the Guggen Kraken Craw, the Yamamoto Yama Craw that I think just came out within the past year or so, the Berkeley Little Super Trooper, I think is what they call it, the Shape 108 from Berkeley, G-Crack Bellows Craw, the Sixth Sense, what do they call? There's the Stroker Craw, I think, Great Lakes Finesse Snack Craw. There are a ton of craws that obviously get left off of this list, but again, you only have room for 8, so we went with the top 8 best sellers. So let's start out with our first round matchup here. We'll obviously explain both baits in the first round, and then we'll choose a winner. And then the second round and the finals will go a little quicker because we've obviously kind of broken down all 8 baits. We don't really need to repeat ourselves. So our first matchup here is the number 1 seed, the Zoom Speed Craw, versus the number 8 seed, the Yum Christie Craw. So the Zoom Craw, if we want to start out with that, is an OG. It's one of the best-selling craws probably of the past, 10 years or so maybe. And I think a part of that is price. I think a part of that is availability. And then a part of it is just because Zoom is Zoom. And no matter what you think about a lot of other soft plastics, I think you're really going to have a hard time finding somebody that hates Zoom. So let's start with the price. The Zoom Speed Craws are $5.49 for a 12-pack. So they're very affordable craws, a good mark right there from the get-go. And we're going to see a lot of craws on this list that tread into that $1 a piece price range. And these come in more at like just under 50 cents. So a really good deal in terms of value for the Speed Craw. Next up is obviously going to be color selection. Zoom Speed Craws, they do come in 40 plus colors. Everything from your green pumpkin magic, which is like maybe my favorite Zoom color of all time. You've got the standard green pumpkins and black and blues. Obviously, every craw on this list is going to have green pumpkin and black and blue in it. But then you go all the way down to these like really cool, unique colors to Zoom. Sprayed Grass, South Africa Special is a killer dirty watercolor. Cinnamon Purple, what do they call it? Yabby, I think it's Yabby, Y-A-B-B-Y, I think. Yabby Mudbug is a cool color. Some real off-the-wall colors from Zoom. When you have things that are 40-plus colors in terms of like your choices there, you're going to have some weird ones. Bullfrog is a weird one they have. They have one that I don't know what they call it, but it's green pumpkin with bright neon blue claws. So basically, if you're looking for something really specialized or something that just no other brand is going to carry, color-wise, Zoom is a great place to start and look for because they have so many off-the-wall colors. So for color selection, you're also going to get a thumbs up for the Zoom Speed Crawl and Zoom in general. As far as durability goes, it's about average. Not really a whole lot to say on the Zoom Speed Crawl there. It's not bad. It's fine. Normal soft plastic. But the overall profile of the Zoom Speed Crawl is something that I do like. I like that it's a slimmer crawl. There have been so many times where I've been out on the water before the past year or so where I wish that something like a Rage Crawl came in a slimmer option because there's certain situations where I want that body. I want it more hydrodynamic. I want it more built for speed. I want it to look less threatening. And that's why I was really happy when like the Scound Bug came out from Ragetail. The Speed Crawl, kind of in that same boat, right? It is not a super wide, super bulky crawl. Again, as the name implies, built for speed. As far as the action goes, the action is good at certain speeds. And again, the name of the crawl says it all. You're working this crawl fast most of the time. If you want to get that kick that you're looking for out of the speed crawl, you're going to give it like a steady retrieve or a big aggressive hop or something like that. But my one knock about this crawl is that you almost get no action at very, very slow speeds, where there are going to be some other crawls on this list that will give you that action even when they're slowed down to like almost the lowest level possible. So the speed crawl, in my opinion, needs speed. Duh. Thanks, Andrew. But it is something that we should probably talk about when you break down this crawl, which means when you're hopping it, when you're yo-yoing it, it does kick really well on the fall. But if you're just really dragging that thing slowly on the bottom, there's definitely better options out there. So on the other side of this matchup, you've got the number 8 seed, the Yum Christie Crawl. And ladies and gentlemen, I think the Christie Crawl is probably the dark horse of this bracket. I think we have a very slept-on crawl here that does outperform other baits in this bracket at half the price. So let's start there. The Yum Christie Crawl is $3.49 for an 8-pack. So they're about the same price as the Zoom Speed Crawl if you look at it per bait. Just under 50 cents is where you're looking at. But here's the kicker. You can also buy the most popular colors like black and blue, green pumpkin, things like that in 30 packs for $10.99. So then you're talking 36 cents per bait, which I would assume makes it by far the cheapest bait on this entire list of all 8, and then probably on the list of cheapest craws in general out there. 36 cents a craw is a great price for a craw that's actually going to perform. Now, if we want to look at colors, you've only got 20 colors here. So you've got about half the number that you have with the Zoom Speed Crawl, still plenty of options, and more colors than some of the competitors on here as well. So you've still got your standards, of course, green pumpkin, black and blue. They've got a really nice darker green pumpkin. It's called Olive Shadow that I really like. They've got a black with gold flake. That's a really nice option for muddy water. In the black and blue category, I would go with black and blue flake versus black and blue shadow. When you hear black and blue shadow, you think, oh, okay, that's probably a little bit more normal. It's a little bit more toned down or whatever. Not really. The shadow has a lot more of like a really bright blue on the underside. And then the black and blue flake is a lot more muted, traditional in terms of like the black and blue you're probably thinking of. So I would probably go black and blue flake if you're actually looking at buying some of these. But overall, some good colors from Yum. As far as durability goes, I would put it on the same level as the Zoom Speed Crawl. Maybe a tiny bit stronger appendages, but it's really close. It's definitely a toss-up for me between these two in the durability category. As far as action and profile, again, I love that it's a slim, skinny crawl. It's got a really skinny body with big enough claws to move and catch attention, but they're not these giant meaty claws like, again, a Rage Crawl or some of the other ones we're going to see on this list. They're way more toned down. And in fact, I would probably say the first time you look at one of these, you're going to look at those craws and go, what the heck are those supposed to do, right? They're just like blobs of plastic. They're not really pronounced. They don't really have a lot of detail on them. They just look like a glob of plastic, almost like the pour went wrong and the claws didn't actually form like they were supposed to. But when you get it in the water, those blobs of plastic do move. So the two claws have a really nice, consistent kick without being obnoxious. So it's a really nice middle of the road crawl if you want something with action, but you don't want something insanely aggressive. It's kind of like a happy medium type crawl for me, which is great because I love the versatility. So I'll use the Christie Crawl on everything from flipping brush on a Texas rig by itself to the back of even like my finessiest jigs. Like I'll put this on the back of like a Beast Coast OW Sniper, right? Something really small and finessey. It still can do that. You just cut off, half to 2/3 of the body, and you have an awesome little trailer for even finesse jigs, which is nice because there's certain times that I want some little bit of consistent movement versus putting something on the back of those finesse jigs like a meat chunk or something that's just back there for profile and no action. So the winner of the first round between the number 1 seed Zoom Speed Craw versus the number 8 seed Yum Christie Craw is the Christie Craw. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we have the biggest upset possible in this list. We start out with a bang, but in my opinion, I think the Christie Craw wins just in terms of versatility, in terms of better value than the Zoom Speed Craw, which is saying a lot because overall, I think Zoom might be my favorite soft plastic brand of all time. So it kind of hurts me to knock them out of here in the first round because they stay in their lane, they make great soft plastics at an affordable price with a ton of colors, and they flat out perform. But when you put these two side by side and you twist my arm and you say, hey, which one would you rather take out with you on the water without knowing the situation? I'm probably going to take the Yum Christie Craw. So the dark horse of this bracket, the Yum Christie Craw, comes away with the first round knockout. All right, everybody, we'll get back to the bracket here in just a second, but first, we are brought to you in part by Dakota Lithium Batteries. Dakota Lithium Batteries are your number 1 choice for dependability and durability out there on the water. I push these suckers hard. I'm in heavy current. I'm in bad weather. They're exposed to the elements. I don't have any sort of box or anything around them. They're just out there exposed to the rain and the snow and the water and the dirt and everything that's going on to them, and they never, ever, ever let me down. That's because Dakota Lithium Batteries are twice the power of traditional batteries at half the weight. They charge up to 5 times faster. They last up to 4 times longer. They've got 100% US-based customer support, and they come with a whopping 11-year warranty. And when you're talking about buying a battery and the difference in, 5 or 10% of the price between all the different brands, something like an 11-year warranty is almost priceless. You get over a decade of protection with this battery, and that is something that to me is invaluable. So I love that they stand by their products. I love that they will help you with your warranty claims. Heaven forbid if you ever have an issue, you know that the folks at Dakota Lithium are there to take care of you. And right now, I'm also going to take care of you because you're going to save 10% off your entire order. 10% off every battery on the website, anything you need with code TACKLETALK10. TackleTalk10 at checkout saves you 10% off the best batteries in the business over at www.dakotalithium.com, the official lithium battery of Bassmaster. All right, our next matchup here is the number 2 seed Rage Craw versus the number 7 seed Z-Man TRD Craws. So let's start with the big dog, the number 2 seed Strike King Rage Craw. The Strike King Rage Craw comes in at 4 inches in overall length for the regular size, and they're $7 for a 7-pack. So double the price of the first 2 craws on this list. And honestly, like I said, that's kind of becoming the norm nowadays. You're seeing a lot of these craws be in this $1 per bait type category here, which kind of sucks, but everything in the world is going up. It's just kind of what we're getting used to now, and the days of your, quarter a craw are kind of over if you want a nice performing soft plastic. So as far as colors go, 40 different colors coming with this Rage Craw. So you have some really nice specialty colors. Falcon Lake Craw is one of my favorites. I've probably told you guys this before, but there's one specific lake around me that for some unknown reason, those bass love a hint of red in their craw. And I fished that lake for years. I thought it was a fluke at first when my buddy pointed it out. And then over the past couple years, I've tested it. There is just something about getting bit on a flipping jig if you have a little bit of red in that dark craw, and it's something that those fish look for. I've tried it side by side. I've A and B'd. I've been stubborn and said, you know what, I'm not throwing anything with red today, and I'll get my butt kicked by my buddy who's over there fishing with red in his craw. So I love the Falcon Lake Craw for that specific lake. Their blue craw is killer, Craw Daddy. They have some really cool colors that you can get if you order online versus going to the store and trying to find, because very rarely are these off-the-wall colors carried in the store. They're going to have your standards, especially if you go to somewhere like Cabela's and Bass Pro that only has like seemingly less and less of these per day because they just expand their Bass Pro versions of things. So order online and you can try some of these cool colors, and that goes for all of these baits. Durability wise, they are not the most durable soft plastic. I will admit that. I tear a lot of pinchers, probably more pinchers torn with the Rage Craw versus the other two craws that we've already talked about on this list. So I think that has a lot to do with the fact that the Rage Craw just has bigger pinchers. There's a lot more meat for those fish to grab onto, and then there's a lot more plastic on either side of the arm. So you've got a big body, you got a big claw, and then that small little bit of plastic that attaches the two. That's a lot to ask of that little piece of soft plastic. So I think sometimes it's inevitable with something with a big claw and a big body, you're going to tear those appendages off from time to time. But I would say, without a doubt, these are not the most durable craws on the planet. But what they lack in durability, they actually make up for in action. The Rage Craw, to me, is the gold standard in terms of claw action on an aggressive soft plastic craw bait. The kick on that Rage Craw is fantastic, and it's fantastic all the time. It's wide, it's consistent, and when you want your craw to be seen, or I guess felt under the water, the Rage Craw is your move, because at slow speeds, at fast speeds, it doesn't matter. That sucker's gonna kick. So I really like this as like my go-to muddy water craw, even more so than some of the other craws on this list that we're going to talk about being good in dirty water. The Rage Craw is the top dog for me. So I love it for flipping. I flip a Rage Craw all the time in dirty water because no matter the fall rate, whether I have a 1/4 ounce or a full ounce flipping weight on there, I know that that craw is going to flap on the way down. And I can rest assured that when the other senses of those fish are impaired in gross muddy water, especially their eyesight, this has enough pulse off of this craw and enough movement, even at falling at slower speeds, that fish can feel and find that bait with their lateral line sense. So I really like that with this craw. You also have scent with this craw. It comes with, I think they call it a coffee scent that they have with these Rage Tail stuff. I don't know if it really does anything, but unlike some other craws that are on this list that have no scent, this at least comes with something on it. And the thing I like about it is that even though it has scent, when you take it out of the pack and you feel it, it feels like a normal soft plastic. It's not gross, it's not oily, it's not slimy. That's going to be a problem that I'm going to have with some other craws that are coming up here in a minute. So this is a true normal feeling soft plastic, which is why I almost don't know or care if it really has scent or if that plays any part in it. I just like them. Even if it didn't say it had scent on the package, it doesn't matter to me. I don't put a lot of stock in that. Again, we'll talk about here in a few minutes. But finally, the biggest praise I think that I can give Rage Tail products is, yes, they're expensive. Yes, they're not the most durable, but the action is unrivaled and the quality of each bait is protected by that clamshell packaging that each of those baits comes in. So when you get 7 baits for $7, every single one of those 7 baits is going to come perfect. No crimped claws, no bent bodies. Every bait is exactly how you want it to look and fish right out of that hard protective clamshell specifically molded for those baits. So the integrity of each bait is kept perfect. So that's the Rage Craw. Now let's go to the challenger to the Rage Craw. And ironically, we have a craw that is almost the polar opposite of the Rage Craw in the Z-Man TRD Craws. So the Z-Man TRD Craws are 2.5 inches, so 1.5 inches smaller than the Rage Craw. Rage Craw big, TRD Craws small. We probably knew that. You can tell Z-Man kind of known for their downsized plastics these days. The cost of the Z-Man TRD Craws is $5 for 6 of them. So the Rage Tail was 7 for 7. This is a tad less expensive, but it's really close. You're almost at that $1 per bait category there. Colors, the Z-Man TRD Craws come in 18 different colors. So the Rage Craw comes in 40. Rage Craw wins on that mark, but Z-Man does have some awesome colors in those 18. Green Pumpkin Orange or the TW Delta Green Pumpkin is really cool alternative to the Rage Falcon Lake Craw that we talked about a minute ago. They've got Mudbug, the Deal, their Molting Craw looks really good. There's a ton of options for those cool two-tone colors that you like to see from Z-Man. But here's where Z-Man wins, obviously, is durability. This is going to be, without question, the most durable craw on this list. Bar none, no arguing it. The Z-Man Elastec plastics are virtually indestructible, and that's kind of a blessing and a curse sometimes, but as far as pure durability of the bait, Z-Man has to win on this entire bracket. Even these big pinchers and not having any flanges on them or anything, just big hunks of plastic that, again, are held together by those tiny little cylinders of soft plastic in between the body and the pincher, they are durable as all get out. So you're positive with this soft plastic craw is it's going to last you many, many fish. The negatives of the ElasTech, though, is that it can be a pain in the tail to rig. So if you're one of those kinds of people that doesn't like to have to do all the tricks that, they talk about with Z-Man, where you got to use a lighter to get it up on a screw lock, or you got to use super glue, or you can only use real light wire hooks or things like that, then ElasTech may not be for you. But ElasTech does not play nice with regular hooks most of the time, especially if you're looking at screw locks or big molded bait keepers, things like that. So just keep that in mind when you do look at something like a Z-Man TRD Craws. But the durability column, Z-Man obviously is top dog in the fishing world, and this Craw is no exception. But with the TRD Craws, you trade durability for action. And this is not by a faulty design. This is the design. The Z-Man TRD Craws are made to look realistic, and you have those pinchers that kind of float, and they're very natural, but not really like flapping or anything. There's no flanges on the pinchers at all, nothing to make them move or flap when you're hopping them or reeling them. It's just supposed to kind of be there. So kind of like a zoom chunk or something like that, where you're just looking to add profile, you want it to look real, but you don't want it to add much or any action. The Z-Man TRD Craws is your finesse, Ned rig, dragging, smallmouthy type of craw bait. And the only other thing here to note with the Z-Man TRD Craws is, like any other Z-Man plastic, do not put these in a bag or a box with any other soft plastics. Don't mix your Z-Man with your Zooms or your Yums or your Strike Kings or anything like that, because this ElasTech from Z-Man just melts and deforms and eats other soft plastic. I don't know what it is in the makeup of that ElasTech, but it absolutely hates being put with other soft plastics. You have to keep it with ElasTech. So don't combine baits in your box or in another bag. Don't mix them. Keep them separate in the bags that they come in. So now it's showdown time. You've got the number 2 seed Strike King Rage Craw versus the number 7 seed, the Z-Man TRD Craws. Z-Man obviously wins on price barely, but definitely durability, and the Rage Craw wins on action and colors. And the winner of this matchup is going to be the Strike King Rage Craw. It just has to be, right? Action is probably the most important thing to me with a craw, and even though Z-Man wasn't aiming for action, in fact, they were probably aiming for lack of action, which is why they designed that bait, I still think you have to give the nod to the Strike King Rage Craw, who is moving on to the semifinals. All right, our next matchup here is the number 3 seed Berkeley Chigger Craw versus the number 6 seed Savage Gear 3D Craw. So let's start with the underdog here. We'll start with the Savage Gear 3D Craw. Surprisingly in the number 6 spot. I didn't think the Savage Gear 3D Craw would be this high up on this list, but I guess it is. I'm sure there are people out there that love the ultra realistic. I'm sure it catches a lot of people's eye on the internet, and people that, might be newer to the sport or something look at it and go, you know what? That looks sweet. I'm going to give it a shot. Not to say anything bad about Savage Gear, but that kind of seems to be like the crowd they aim for sometimes. So let's start with the Savage Gear 3D Craw. The size, it comes in 3 different sizes, but we're going to focus on the 4-inch model today, kind of the standard type size here. They only come in about 10 different colors, I think, but the tough part is right now, these craws are on clearance almost everywhere. So I'm not sure if they're getting ready to do away with them completely, or if they're going to redo things, or they're just clearing the house. I don't know, but something is up, because as far as price goes, these are normally a big negative for these craws is how expensive they are at a retail price of $10 for 3 of them. So an insanely expensive soft plastic craw, but right now they're on clearance for like $3. So deeply discounted down to about $1 per bait, which makes them sort of standard priced for regular craws these days. So as far as durability goes, it's decent with these. It's on par with standard soft plastic, maybe a tiny bit tougher, but the action is very, very similar to something like a TRD Craw as we just talked about. The Savage Gear 3D Craw looks like someone 3D printed a real crawfish from your lake or from your river. It's ultra realistic in its shapes, its details. The overall appearance of this just kind of looks like you snapped your fingers and you made a real crawfish into plastic, versus a lot of the other soft craws on the market are more like, there's a cylinder body. They might put some, sort of appendages off to the side, and then there's just 2 flat claws that sort of flip in the water. This looks like a real crawfish. This looks like something that you would go to Chuck E. Cheese, exchange 400 tokens for or whatever, and you would get to take home. It's more like an action figure than it is a bait. But same as the Z-Man TRD Craws, this is meant to look realistic in the water, not really to flap a whole lot, if anything at all, not to do anything crazy with the pinchers. The pinchers are, I think they say say air-filled, so they're kind of hollow in the middle and they sit up kind of in a defensive posture there, meant to draw attention, meant to kind of look a little bit more natural with those craws raised versus just kind of like sitting on the ground. So if you're looking for something to sit there and look real versus something to flip into bushes or hop along the bottom or draw attention or anything, this could be a good choice for that if you're just looking for something realistic to sit on the bottom. So you've got the Savage Gear 3D Craw coming in at the number 6 seed, probably because it's currently on sale, making it a real contender for once at the discounted price. And then it is facing off against the number 3 seed Berkley Chigger Craw. Now, this is a tough draw for Savage Gear because you have the Berkley Chigger Craw, which is also in the conversation for the best-selling craw out there right now. I'm guessing Zoom has it beat by a tad. Obviously, the Tackle Warehouse rankings back that up, but it's got to be really close. The Chigger Craw is a favorite amongst anglers young and old because of its simple design and its versatility. So the basics here, you do have 2 types of Chigger Craws to choose from because it's Berkley, which means they've taken everything good that was about their regular soft plastics and now they've shoved them into power bait and max scent. So I don't think you can even buy regular Chigger Craws anymore. I think all you can buy is a power bait version or a max scent version. But either way, you get fairly similar actions with different plastic makeup, probably in different scent and a different price. So the Chigger Craws that come in regular power bait and that version are typically $5.99 for the 3-inch Chigger Craws with 10 baits per pack, and then the 4-inch Chigger Craws come in 9 baits per pack, but they're $5.99 for either 10 baits or 9 baits, depending on if you go 3-inch or 4-inch. Meanwhile, if you jump up and you go to the max scent version, which is their top-of-the-line scented plastics, you're going to pay $8.99 for those same packs, and you're going to get 8 baits in the 3-inch version and 7 baits in the 4-inch version. So with the max scent, you're paying $3 more per bag, and you're getting 2 less baits. So just remember that when you're looking at both of these and you're deciding whether to go power bait or max scent, and this kind of goes for almost all the Berkley soft plastics, there is a big trade-off for going to max scent. Not only is it more expensive, but you do have to pay attention. They give you 2 less baits. So for the sake of the conversation here, we're going to stick with the regular power bait version, the cheaper regular version, or at least the most regular version we have out there. So in the power bait version, you have 2 different sizes and you got 13 colors. So not a huge selection of colors, but you do have ones that count. You've got your staples, green pumpkin, black and blue, obviously, but then you have goat, which is a really cool, darker, natural color. You got Alabama craw, things like that. But the interesting part of these Chigger Craws is almost every one of the colors they offer is just a small twist on a natural color. So there's not a lot, or maybe even any, off-the-wall, really odd, specialized colors like you would see with someone like Zoom. They really stick to that natural kind of color palette and just sort of barely branch off between their colors. So durability-wise, they're not the most durable craws out there for sure. You're going to go through some, especially if you're like me and you switch your trailer every time one of your pinchers comes off. Depending on your hook keeper, you're going to rip some bodies here. Overall, it's not hateful, but they're definitely not at the top of the list on here in terms of durability. I do like that right out of the bag, they come with their claws attached. So some of the other craws on this list do this as well, but I do like the claws that you have to rip apart because that helps keep the bait fishable, in my mind at least, in a loose packaging. So there's less that can happen with those claws going all whopper-jawed if they're connected together versus if they were 2 loose claws. One of them can get bent behind the body, one's bent the other way in the packaging. At least keeps them kind of straight. So I do like that. So less crimped baits right out of the bag, even though it doesn't come with a clamshell. Now, the action is where a Chigger Craw is really cool because you wouldn't have guessed it by looking at it because the claws are just like long and flat, but the Chigger Craw can flap, and it's got a really, I would say, like wavy action to it versus a hard flap. So if you flip it, those claws almost more flutter than they do hard kick, which I like because they serve a purpose in my bag. Not all the time do I want this hyper aggressive action like a rage crawl we talked about earlier. This is something that can do a lot of different things really well. This action is not too much, not too little, and similar to one of the final baits that we'll talk about here in a second. So I'll go on record saying I'm not a giant fan of power bait or max scent, maybe solely just because of how they feel coming out of the bag. And I hate rigging power bait and max scent and things like that. I hate that little residue that you get on your hands. But max scent plastics also just kind of seem to be a little bit more porous to me, which leads obviously to durability issues. But with that being said, I know there's a lot that goes into the study and the perfecting of these type of like power baits and max scent formulas. I have a lot of respect for the work that Berkley does and puts into them. I've never been a massive scent guy, but when we had that episode with like Mark Sexton, he was talking about all the max scent stuff that they do and how they rigorously test and the science that actually goes into it. Again, I do respect the craft. I do understand that it probably gives you some sort of advantage or some sort of importance down the road somewhere, but just for me, I'm just like a regular soft plastic guy, which is why I'll still never forgive Berkley for getting rid of the Havoc line that was like not really oily or scented at all. It was just the shapes that you wanted in regular soft plastic. But again, whole different conversation there. Just to kind of say, I don't put a ton of stock in scent, which is why we're not talking about that with a lot of these in detail. So for the matchup here, you have the number 3 seed Berkley Chigger Craw versus the number 6 seed Savage Gear 3D Craw. And the winner is going to be the Chigger Craw. It's too good. It's too versatile. I've caught too many fish and seen too many fish caught on it, especially by my largemouth buddies, to let it get snubbed here. So the Chigger Craw will be moving on. All right, we'll get back to the bracket here in just a second, but first we are brought to you in part by RTIC Coolers. And right now, if you need a last-second gift, maybe you dropped the ball and you didn't get it in time, no worries. They have fast shipping where you can get a replacement gift or you can get a better late than never gift for that certain someone right now over at RTICOutdoors.com. Or if you got some money laying around, you got some money for Christmas and you want something that you'll actually use this year and will actually do you some good out on the water, check out RTIC Outdoors. They have the best hard coolers, soft coolers, and drinkware on the planet at a price that both you and I can actually afford. You don't need to be a millionaire to have these coolers, right? These 4 letters on the front mean that you got the best quality at the best price. So you can head over to www.rticoutdoors.com, check out their full list of items, and they've always got brand new stuff hitting the website. The brand new everyday tumblers are awesome if you just want like a good cup or a good gift for someone with a nice straw, leak proof, all that kind of stuff. I have a couple, I really like them. Also, their bottles, their coffee mugs, their soft coolers are great for you kayak guys and gals out there. And then if you got a boat, something like a smaller ultralight cooler is a lifesaver. So go check them out over at www.rticoutdoors.com and keep the adventure going with RTIC. And then the final matchup of this episode is going to be the number 4 seed Netbait Pack-A-Craw versus the number 5 seed X-Zone Lures Adrenaline Craw. So this is a really interesting matchup because you have 2 baits that are from somewhat smaller companies that have absolute cult-like followings. However, I think one of these seems to be an older angler's choice, and one of these seems to have a hold on like the fresher, younger crowd. So let's start with the Netbait Pack-A-Craw. This is, I would say at least, the older angler's choice. And not like 112-year-old anglers. I'm talking like my age and up. Probably 30s and up, I'd say tend to lean toward the Pack-A-Craw versus the Adrenaline Craw, but I could be wrong. So similar to Berkley here, though, and this is my one gripe with Netbait here, is we have a similar situation with Netbait than we had with Berkley and with their different scents. So Netbait is owned by a company called American Bait Works, and that same company also owns Bait Fuel, and that's that clear liquid that every pro was pimping out about a year ago. It's slimy. It's this like weird, I guess, scentless juice. I don't really know what it's supposed to be, and it's supposed to help you magically catch more fish. So naturally, when you saw like Berkley say, no, we're not going to make regular versions of our baits anymore, now they're all going to be either power bait or max scent versions because we have this brand of scent that we've developed. Netbait seems to be doing a really similar thing here with Bait Fuel. So you're used to being able to buy Pack-A-Craws in the regular black and yellow packages, normal soft plastics, dry out of the bag that you're normally used to using. But now when you buy them, they're in this more of like a yellowish greenish package with black accents. And then there's a red, white, and blue Bait Fuel logo in the bottom left corner. And these baits, similar to Berkley now, are these like slimy Bait Fuel infused versions of Pack-A-Craws. So same shape, same action, but slimy and kind of scent infused, which crotchety old man Andrew here doesn't really like. So give me my regular Pack-A-Craws. So there's my rant there, I guess. All these companies that are just messing around and adding gross, slimy scents to all of your good soft plastics that we used to like, stop it. Or I guess you could make both versions, put them both out there on the market and see which one sells better. Because I can almost guarantee you that the regular dry versions would outsell the slimy scented versions. But the new bait fuel infused pack of CRAW is $4.79 for a 9-pack. So extremely affordable, and it comes in 32 colors. So win-win. They have all of your favorites. They've also got an all-black version, which I love. Their Kentucky Special is really good. The watermelon crawfish is a cool, like, natural-ish, brownish color. So you've got some good marks on colors here from NetBait. Durability-wise is really good. I've never had an issue with NetBait pack of CRAWs in terms of durability. Now, I haven't fished the newer, like, bait fuel version as much as I have the old version, so I'm kind of going off my experiences with the old version here, but the old versions were one of the most durable CRAWs that I was using at the time. I would use the chunk version all the time on flipping jigs, or the tiny chunk on finesse jigs. I'd use the regular pack of CRAW for Texas rigs. Just a really durable, obviously not Elastec or anything remotely like that, but as far as a regular soft plastic, it's a CRAW that you can beat up and you can catch plenty of fish on one bait. So the action of a pack of CRAW, I'm going to say we're in like similar territory here to a chigger craw. Obviously similar shapes to the claws, but the pack of CRAW has this weird like raised zigzag pattern on the claws that I guess help it move, but whatever it does, it works because you get good flop, not a rage craw, heavy, aggressive kick or anything, but a healthy flopping, I guess, of the pinchers no matter what speed you're really going at. So NetBait's pack of CRAW is a winner in my book for durability, for price. It's really a force to be reckoned with in the crawl world that I think a lot of times gets overlooked. And then the challenger here, we have the number 5 seed, the X-Zone Lures Adrenaline Craw. And this is a crawl that's become really popular in certain circles, especially with, I would say, a younger, kind of hipper crowd out there. So it comes in 3.5 inches for the version that we're going to talk about today, and there's 7 of them in a pack for $4.99. Again, well under that $1 per bait price point. So we've got 18 colors here from X-Zone Lures. We've got some really off-the-wall colors, one of which I like is called 309. It's like a natural green pumpkin-y with a really wicked natural shad color on the belly. A really cool color and a cool pour from X-Zone. As far as durability goes, it's solid. There's no glaring issues here that I've ever found with an adrenaline crawl, but the action, the profile of this particular bait are really what catches your eye. So it looks a lot more like... I don't know how to explain this. It's like I guess a Rage Menace went to a Metallica concert. Like that's the version of this crawl that you're looking at. An extremely aggressive look to it. These 7 needle point appendages on either side, really razorbacky looking, 2 long, skinny, fierce pinchers that are coming out, and then a pronounced flange. So I think this is really meant to be kind of an in-your-face modern crawl. And the action is very much like something you would expect to see from a Rage soft plastic. It's hard kicking. It's got a quick startup, which I like. The floating claws are obviously a nice touch. We have some other baits on this list that also have those floating claws, again, to help them sit slightly up in more of a defensive posture. It's just a movement maker in this adrenaline crawl. Now, what I do like about it, other than action, is the slender profile. Again, we've talked about it with 2 baits probably since we started this episode. I like that some of these come in a more streamlined looking crawl. I think that's the move more times than not, and I think it gets overlooked. I think a lot of people talk about bulking up and talk about their profile being, bigger and flaring out the skirts and things like that. I really think that's a wrong approach a lot of times, and I think we just get caught up with some of the terms you hear, right? I want a bulky, I want a beefier profile, I want a bigger profile for those bigger fish. We've talked about it from a biological standpoint with like Zach Loafman, who was sitting here, and has more time looking at crawdads and looking at crayfish than any other person I've ever talked to, telling us, no, Andrew, you don't always want a bigger profile. In fact, a lot of times you want a smaller profile because that's a species of craw that these fish are more likely to eat. So just keep that in mind. But as far as the X-Zone Lure Adrenaline Craw goes, a really cool, modern, kind of young person's take, I think, on a craw bait. So it's time for the face-off here. We have the number 5 seed X-Zone Lures Adrenaline Craw versus the number 4 seed NetBait Pack of CRAW. And your winner here is going to be the NetBait Pack of CRAW. The X-Zone Lures Adrenaline Craw puts up a heck of a fight. It's definitely worth your while to pick up a bag and try them, but I just can't get to a point where I can put it over the tried and true, versatile, one-stop shop that is a NetBait Pack of CRAW. So Now that leads us to the semifinals here. So in the matchups, we have the number 8 seed Yum Christie Craw that upset the number 1 seed Zoom Speed Craw and is now advancing to face off against the number 4 seed Paca Craw, which takes down the number 5 seed X-Zone Lures Adrenaline Craw. Then on the other side of the bracket, we have the number 2 seed Strike King Rage Craw advancing over the Z-Man TRD Craws, and it will be facing off against the number 3 seed Berkeley Chigger Craw, which defeated the number 6 seed Savage Gear 3D Craw. So first up here, we have the number 8 seed Christie Craw versus the number 4 seed Paca Craw. And we already discussed here both these baits in detail, so it's just going to come down to a head-to-head comparison. The Yum Christie Craw wins on price, but the Paca Craw from NetBait is a very, very close second. And then the Paca Craw probably wins just barely on durability, and then you have two very different actions. You have the Christie Craw, which I would call a smaller, finesse, aggressive craw, I guess if that makes sense. And then you have an all-around medium action craw in something like a NetBait Paca Craw. So I really do want to give this nod to the Christie Craw here, but I just don't think I can do it. I'm close. I really considered giving the Christie Craw the advance here, but I just think you have to move the Paca Craw along. As much as I love the Christie Craw personally, and I think it's truly one of the most slept-on soft plastics on the market, the Paca Craw moves on just based off of versatility and quality and durability alone. Now, on the other side of this bracket here, we have the number 2 seed Strike King Rage Craw versus the number 3 seed Berkeley Chigger Craw. And this one is kind of like the last matchup on steroids, right? You have the gold standard of aggressive soft plastics versus maybe the gold standard of middle ground action and the ability to do almost anything. So the Rage Craw does come in a clamshell, protecting the integrity of the bait, but the Chigger Craw is more affordable. But then the Chigger Craw comes only in power bait and max scent versions, where the Rage Craw comes in good old dry regular soft plastic that's supposedly coffee scented. So here, I'm going to go with the Rage Craw. It is literally the gold standard of hard-kicking plastics, and it changed the game for craws and soft plastics in general. So unfortunately, it is going to take down the old reliable Berkeley Chigger Craw. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, that leaves us with the finals here. We have the 2 seed Strike King Rage Craw versus the 4 seed NetBait Paca Craw. And just the way that this bracket sets up, this is almost a repeat of the last round, except I think you could make the argument that the perfect finals would have been the last round. It would have been the Rage Craw versus the Chigger Craw. But the way the bracket sets up and the way the sales numbers set up, we have the Rage Craw versus the Paca Craw. And to get right to it, the number 2 seed Strike King Rage Craw is going to take home the crown in this matchup. To me, if you had to snap your fingers and erase every craw from the planet except one, I think I would probably pick a Strike King Rage Craw. It's just so good. It's got consistent motion. You never have to worry about what it's doing under the water because it's doing what it's supposed to be doing 100% of the time. It's a true killer, and in my mind, I think it is deserving of the victory here. So congratulations to the Strike King Rage Craw for coming out victorious in our bracket of 8 of the best-selling soft plastics on the market. All right, everybody, that is today's episode. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you all had a Merry Christmas. I hope you have a safe, fun New Year. Next week, we have one of the most anticipated shows of the year. Backed by popular demand, our New Year's resolution for anglers will be next Tuesday, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, shoot me an email, tackletalkpodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on the internet, tackletalkpodcast.com. There you can submit a mailbag question for your chance to be heard on an upcoming episode of Tackle Talk. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, Tackle Talk Podcast, and we will see you right back here next Tuesday for another brand new episode of Tackle Talk.
Thank you for listening to the Tackle Talk Podcast. Tackle Talk is produced by Andrew Hayes. Copyright 2021. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.